Hey, welcome to the Backyard Professor videos on Mormonism tonight. I have the guest Dan Vogel for the second time in a row this week to talk more about Freemasonry and Mormonism. So let's get this rode on the show. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome Dan Vogel. How are you doing tonight?
Hi everybody.
We are back. Oh, I put the wrong one on us, Dan. There we go. Now we don't feel like we're crowding the screen. Holy cow. So we've had a week to ponder the greatness with which we discussed last week. And I had a heck of an adventure this week. I misplaced my book. And so I found it this afternoon. So I didn't get a whole lot of reading done, but Dan did. So after all, this is his review of this book, and we're going to kind of have a fun recapitulation and discuss some historical issues with the book that Dan both finds issues with as well as likes, because that's the way every book is as far as I'm concerned. I've never found a book yet except the Book of Mormon where I've totally agreed with it. Oh, okay. I have just sinned vilely with my comments. Hey, I'm going to hold on. I'm going to go to the comments to see. Hey, Debbie Joe, how are you? John Rosbarski, Doug Vincent, Mark Crispin, how are you? Peter Higgs, Alan Young. All right. Well, I've just about said hi to everybody. Hold it. I don't see you in here, Dan. Oh, wait. That's because I snuck you into the show, didn't I? All right, Dan. So here we are having a good time. Did you have a good week?
Yep. Very busy. Very busy. I'm always
That's good.
Too busy.
No, don't be too busy.
Yeah. Getting ready for this show for part of my time, and the other part of my time I'm making that video on masonry.
Oh yeah.
Part 2.
Yeah, you're still making it. Boy, you put some serious time into your videos. You're kind of an inspiration here.
Yeah, I try my best. I learn as I go. You always learn something new all the time when you run up against a problem or something.
So when can we expect you to have that second video out, young man?
Oh, in a couple of weeks.
A couple of weeks? You're going to torture us for a couple of weeks?
I'm still making it. Well, about halfway.
Remind me after the show that I'm going to have to start taking lessons from you on how to make better videos then, because I don't take 2 weeks to make mine. I have taken 3 days before to make one. So anyway, hey, T.O., welcome. Okay, you guys. Let's see. What we want to do is, oh, here we go. Here's a comment just for you, my friend. There you go. Can't wait for that one. Hey, how come our names aren't on here, Dan? For Pete's sake.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
Wait a minute. What is going on?
My name is down in the backstage part.
I've got it on, but it's not
on. We learn as we go.
Oh, I had them on last week. Is that going to do it? No. Well, I'll be darned. I wonder why. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I have it show display names. All right. Well, anyway, I'm Dan Vogel, and the other guy is Kerry Shirts, so we'll get this going. Yeah, I had that on. I don't know why it's not on. That's kind of weird. Okay, so let's you wanted to comment, you wanted to give kind of a recapitulation, didn't you, on what we talked
Yeah.
about last week, and
Mhm.
possibly discuss some of the issues that they brought up in the chat.
Yeah.
And so why don't you,
I hope they're here and they keep on commenting.
well, oh yeah, they'll be here eventually.
Commenting here and on Facebook.
Oh yeah, you've been having the war on Facebook, and here you're the
Well,
nice.
not a war, just they're making comments, and
That's
you know,
wonderful.
they don't have
That's
to like
wonderful.
everything I say, and it's okay with me. But they should remember that no one has received as many bad reviews as me.
What?
You haven't been reviewed until you've been reviewed by farms.
Oh, that's right. And the good news is you are 100% negative reviewed. Woohoo. No, that's not true, because I read out of a couple of those reviews where they thought your work was intriguing and fantastic and in depth and all, even though they disagree with your conclusions. But so,
Well,
you have it.
they sometimes agree with me, and
Yeah,
sometimes I agree with them.
that's correct. And we'll see an
About as
instance of
often.
that tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just about as often, as each other. So we're going to recapitulate. We're going to
Yes. Let's do it.
review some of the key concepts, and I'm going to read to you some of the comments by the authors of this book on various points. And according to them, I got some things wrong, and maybe I did. Okay. Maybe I misread the book. Okay. So let's start with the very first quote in the introduction, which would be page 1 of the introduction. There's this quote I read last time by Franklin D. Richards way back in 1899.
Uh-huh.
And he said that Joseph Smith joined the Masons in order to find out what parts they had right, and then I commented that I didn't believe that, because Joseph Smith didn't have to join, and he certainly didn't have to establish a Nauvoo lodge to find out what the Masons believed. He was well aware of what the Masons believed. Then, when I was commenting on the page 17 of the introduction, where they took to task some of the apologists, and I said, they said it was defamatory to Joseph Smith, and I said, well, that's how is joining the Masons just to learn what they had not defamatory.
Mm-hmm.
And I assumed the authors were on board with that quote, because they didn't qualify it. And then on the next page, they had quoted Franklin D. Richards again about the prophet asked the Lord and obtained a promise to restore that which was lost. And of course, that's exactly what they believe. And so I concluded that they believe both things. Well, Nick Latursky, he said that that Dan Vogel,
That's
right from
you.
the start, you read the Franklin D. Richards quote and claimed that it represented what we are arguing, or were arguing. Even a casual reading of the book shows that we did not support Richards' claim. Rather, we argue that Joseph Smith almost certainly had an extensive awareness of the Masonic ritual from his youth. So, but it's not obvious. Okay, it's not obvious that they made that connection, though. That
Okay.
it's you can't hold inconsistent views at the same time.
Why not? Oh,
Well, it may have been the case that this is my response that Joseph Smith had knowledge about Masonic ritual. Isn't clear that the author saw that as contradicting their other position or contradicting the Richards account.
Okay.
They let his statement stand while taking issue only with those currently holding the view that Joseph Smith embraced Masonry for social and political networking or for protection. That would be my main view. On the next, okay. Then to my statement, Cheryl Bruno said Joseph Smith was not joining the lodge to find out more about Masonry, but was trying to influence Freemasonry in Illinois. So,
And where did you say that? Oh, that was in the comments?
On Facebook.
Oh, I see. Okay. Uh-huh.
No, that was in the chat. Sorry. That was in the chat.
That was in the chat? Uh-huh.
That was in the chat. And I say, like, why should Joseph Smith care about influencing Masonry? He's building his own kingdom, and joining for protection makes the most sense to me. Anyway, so at least
your position is that Joseph Smith is actually, rather than worrying about what is going on within Masonry, is he's more or less interested in doing his own thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Building his own kingdom, not theirs. So I'm doing this to inform the listeners that there was the difference, and that I may have mistaken their intention. It may not have been expressed as clearly. I mean, according to Nick, you have to read the rest of the book before you figure out that that's not their position. Mm-hmm. Then there seems to be an issue with my calling the defamatory argument. I call it the defamatory argument ad hominem.
Okay. Uh-huh. And how were you doing an ad hominem? How did that arise? How'd that come about?
Okay, well, I was talking about ad hominem circumstantial, okay, which is different than ad hominem abusive. Ad hominem abusive, you just abuse the person, calling them names or whatever. Ad hominem circumstantial is where you use their position or their other beliefs to coerce them into accepting your argument rather than creating an argument and evidence that stands on its own. So it would be so yeah, let me read part of that. Okay. So just make sure what I'm talking about, what ad hominem is.
So you're not attacking the authors. That's what you're trying to say.
I'm saying they're using an ad hominem argument to try
they are using the ad hominem. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
To coerce. This is an example of an ad hominem. Is to say that they're being hypocritical. The apologists are being hypocritical because if they're trying to say Joseph Smith only joined for political or social reasons, that is defamatory to Joseph Smith because he wasn't being honest when he took the oath not to be mercenary in his joining.
Okay.
So whenever somebody accuses someone of being hypocritical, and it's a very popular method of arguing, but it's fallacious. It's an ad hominem circumstantial. You're not addressing the argument. You're not addressing the argument, the position. You are using that person's position to degrade their argument rather than addressing and refuting the argument.
Okay, I get that. Okay, good.
Thus, to claim that Joseph Smith and his brethren sought membership in the Masonic Lodge because they desired to prestige, protection, and power, such an alliance should have guaranteed is to argue against the integrity of the prophet and his companions. So they're saying to the apologists that they are attacking the prophet. They are making the prophet's reputation lesser by arguing this, rather than trying to arguing against the social and political networking's argument by the apologists. And
So-
anyone else that has the similar position like me. So I emphasize the protection part because I think it's easy, it's apparent, it's easy to demonstrate because that's what it's all about. David
and he's
Hackett,
got more.
you remember
This is typical Dan Vogel. Look, he's doing what the BYP does. He's pulling out his resources off the shelf. I love this. See, don't tell me I don't have any influence. I have influenced the great Dan Vogel.
necessity is mother of invention, huh?
There
Okay,
you go.
So in that book, David Hackett Fisher argues, in the realm of consciousness, a man who does something does it for every reason he can think of, and a few unthinkable reasons as well. Fisher also speaks of motivational pluralism and mentions psychologist Abraham Maslow's hierarchies of motivation. Robert Jones Schaefer.
Now, what did you call that? Multiplicity. What was that? Pluralism?
Motivational
pluralism.
So what's his motive for joining? That's what we're talking about. And so I'm saying that there could be, we should leave open the possibility that there's more than one reason, although I think the main one and the easiest one to demonstrate is for protection.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah.
Oh, another book. Look at this.
A guide to historical method.
A guide to historical method. Who is that by?
This is Robert Jones Schaefer.
It's the light show. Oh, there we go. Robert Jones Schaefer. Okay.
That's kind of glare. There's glare.
There you go. That's better.
There's a lot of glare here. So he talks about, it warns, psychology has not agreed on a single theory of human personality. It gives us insights, but not answers. Historians thus will be cautious about blanket assessment of human motivation, for example, to self-interest, the will to dominate, or altruism. Motive is difficult to ascertain, to be sure. As Fisher explains, there can be no primary direct evidence of any past motive. No direct evidence.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But there is tacit logic of inference, which can attain a high degree of probable accuracy. And that's what we're looking for, probability.
Yeah, that's about the best we can get.
Your Bayesian, what would you call it? Logic?
Yeah, yeah, and then I think that's honestly, with this historical situation, the best realistically that we can get. I mean, we'll never have certainty about motives. You know, that's intent. That's a tough one.
So, to me, it's obvious that Masons would provide protection based on the oaths that they take to protect one another and the brotherhood and all that.
Okay.
It would be, in your Bayesian theorem, would be a lot easier to demonstrate than this really tangled thing of Joseph Smith being a Masonic restorer from birth, almost, from the first vision at least, but even before that, according to these authors in some places.
Ooh, we're going to talk about that a lot, aren't we? Probably next time, the first vision.
But we're going to get into a little bit here too.
All right. All right.
So
I'm strapping in, man. We've got a way to get there before we're there. We're going to have to
Yeah.
call up Abrac or something.
So another thing I want to discuss is what is a meta narrative?
Yeah, what is a meta narrative?
Mhm.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Just what do you mean, Mr. Vogel?
There's many definitions of it, and the
Okay.
postmodernists have taken it over. Well, they actually invented the phrase, but a satisfying, coherent, grand story. It could be also a grand narrative, a meta narrative, a grand narrative. The thing like it holds the whole Bible together. That kind of
Oh, yeah,
a
that's a
story.
good illustration.
Yeah, an overarching account of interpretation of events or interpretation of events and circumstances that provides a pattern or structure that gives meaning to unrelated events.
So, can I give you an example that came to mind because of what you just said?
Yeah.
Israel would be a meta narrative of the Bible, just like Masonry is for this book. Does that sound right to you?
Well,
Is that
there's a
what you
way
think?
to talk about Masonry and the influence of Masonry on Mormonism without a meta narrative.
Yeah.
In my view, that's what should have been done.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's an overarching uh, story about stories, you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's a story about a story, encompassing and explaining other little stories within the totalizing schema.
Okay.
Uh, over an overarching story or storyline that gives context, meaning, and purpose to Joseph Smith's whole life.
Yeah.
Method Infinite is a meta narrative because it attempts to explain and give meaning to Joseph Smith's whole life, not content to describe possible influences of Masonry in Joseph Smith's thought. Method Infinite sees Joseph Smith as having a master plan for the beginning to restore Masonry from the beginning. One thing I should clarify is that to keep clear is that in writing his scriptures and in founding his church, he was free to draw on anything, right?
And he actually did draw on a lot of things
Yeah,
based on what we're seeing. I mean, it was pretty impressive when who was the Mormon scholar Thomas Weymouth, I believe. Didn't he do that BYU study on the influence of Adam Clark
yeah,
on Joseph Smith? Yeah, that was a couple years back. I mean, now that's I mean, yeah, we gripe about these guys holding back information and all, but that was impressive that they 20 years ago he couldn't have published that. While Blake
yeah,
Hacker was alive, he couldn't have published
yeah.
that. There's
Well,
no
now it
well, in
seems
fact,
that
you guys didn't you and Metcalf talk about the influence of wasn't that your scriptural cosmology article years
we
ago?
talked about Clark and others, and
Yeah.
uh,
So
yeah.
that's kind of interesting to okay.
So it's advantageous to talk about Joseph Smith putting together the inspired revision from various sources, being inspired in a more general, nebulous kind of way, rather than translating the actual ancient text as it first read, although that's what he claimed to be doing.
That's true. Yeah.
But it's now more advantageous to see the inspired revision as just a general inspired commentary on the text, a smoothing out of the text, a adding to the text, these kind of midrash kind of things that these authors talk about,
Right.
and not no ancient text relying on any ancient text or restoring an ancient text, because it's been proven that is not what happened. So, so he could draw on anything: Methodism, Presbyterianism, Quakerism, revivals, Masonry, and it doesn't imply a belief. Okay, that would be called the intentional fallacy in literature. But that didn't make him pro-Mason any more than it made his calling Edward Partridge to be the first bishop a pro-Campbellite, because the bishops, actually Sidney Rigdon was a Campbellite bishop before he joined the Mormons.
Okay.
Or instituting the United Order make him a pro-Owenite, Owenite commune. Or teaching baptism by immersion, a pro-Baptist.
Right.
Things like that.
But I think because of the nature, wouldn't you think that because of the nature of so many of his neighbors and family and all being Mason, and they would have been, maybe at first the Book of Mormon was anti-Mason, but through time, and true, Joseph never changed the narrative of the Book of Mormon, but through time, having all that Masonic influence would have turned him into a pro-Mason. So he would have been pro-Mason for easily a decade. And that wouldn't involve a meta-narrative necessarily, would it?
The meta-narrative I'm talking about is that he had this plan from the beginning to
from the
restore.
beginning, right? Yeah, and I'm saying maybe he didn't have that. What if he didn't have it, and yet he was pro-Mason for a dozen years? That would explain the pro-Mason approach, at least later on in his life. That's all I'm pointing out. And everybody around him, obviously, they were all pro-Masons.
Everyone?
After 1835, don't you think?
I don't
there
see
were
any.
Anti-Masons were there in the
well, W.W. Phelps
was pretty bitter early on.
He was an anti-Masonic publisher.
Yes, he was.
In Canandaigua.
A very important place we're going to go. Yeah.
Before he was a Mormon, and what I read recently was that he never joined the Masonic Lodge in Nauvoo either. So, but Cheryl says, I feel like Dan doesn't understand the meta-narrative here. And there shouldn't be one. That's my
fun
point.
To have her expound that when she gets on here, won't it?
Right. Once she understands where I'm coming from.
Once we understand the various positions.
You might take notes of some of the questions I have about the text.
Sure. Absolutely.
For a second edition or something.
Absolutely.
But, she also said, yes, Joseph Smith's aim was to be a Masonic restorer from the beginning.
Okay,
so she says, I don't understand the meta-narrative. And then she says exactly what I've been saying about the meta-narrative.
Okay.
So there's no question Joseph Smith knew about Masonry and anti-Masonry early in his life. And there's no problem with Joseph Smith being influenced by Masonry even earlier than generally believed. The question we are exploring here is, did he view himself as a restorer of Masonry from the start? Finding occasional Masonic influences won't establish that. He was influenced by lots of things, restored Masonry in Nauvoo. Therefore, that's what he intended to do from the start. If he restored Masonry in Nauvoo, therefore, that was his plan all along. And I say it was more or less an opportunity.
So rather than a plan,
it presented itself to him, and he just. Okay. Joseph Smith wasn't great on master plans. That's why we have him restoring the church so many different times. So he when he started dictating the Book of Mormon, he had no master plan to that either. It developed as time went on. It became more and more religious. And by the end of his dictation, you could tell he's preparing and getting ready to found a church. Before before he started.
I
Well, I'll
think
get
that's
into that
because of the
later.
sacramental prayers in Moroni's book.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And then you get to Nephi's prophecies. You know, he dictated the
Curse of the
first part
devil and church
last.
of God. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's prophetic, and he prophesies of himself. He prophesies that Jesus is going to appear to the Nephites, and they didn't. When you read from Mosiah up, it takes a while before these prophets even know that Jesus is going to come. When if you go according to chronology, they should have already known it. So this is Brent Metcalf's article in his book on the priority of Mosiah, shows just how Joseph Smith was developing even while he's dictating the Book of Mormon. So he has no like master plan. He didn't even plan on founding and restoring a church when he started dictating the Book of Mormon. It wasn't even in the works of founding a church. He was just dictating the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
And I'll get to that, and I'll get to that at the end of this little segment on meta narrative here.
Sure.
So if you have a perspective when writing history, if you have that perspective, and which is, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Cheryl also says,
Hey, just for the audience sake, just so you understand, I saw a question asking, can they call in and ask a question? And I don't have a call in aspect yet on my program, but if you'd like, ask a question in the chat and I can post it and we can discuss it once Dan gets done with his particular view. And also, yes, you're welcome to ask questions in the chat for now, and we'll try to address them.
Yeah, you should spy on the chat and write down the questions.
There you go. Yeah, I've been doing that.
Yeah, or call my attention to it because I'm looking at it over here too. Okay, if you see one while I'm talking. So Cheryl also says that no mythologizing on our part, just a recognition that there is synchronicity in the world and things we can't explain. So if you have that view, synchronicity, this opens you, and she also, or they, the authors in the book, mention the collective unconscious of the nation. So if you have these kinds of views, when you're writing history, you are mythologizing. This is the weakness of Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. Determinism, reading into events, another form of the providential view of history that the Puritans had, where God is manipulating historical events and they're trying to read the events to determine what God's disposition towards their colony is.
Okay.
And it's the same kind of view that you read in the Book of Mormon, where there's an ebb and flow, where God is punishing them with Indians and all sorts of calamities and war, war all the time.
Sure.
Until they humble themselves and then they repent and then good things happen and then they get proud and then their pride leads to a fall and then another calamity happens. This is Mormon's writing, a cycle kind of a thing. But it was a Puritan view. The Puritans even noted and published these providences, and it's all imagination. I mean, they're trying to look into events and make up things. There's nothing about it. It's like reading tea leaves.
So I take it you're not real strong on the idea of synchronicity.
No determinism, or the providential view of history. Okay. Let's see. They both leave a lot up to the imagination, like reading tea leaves and tarot cards. Now, in psychology and psychoanalysis, the way a person interprets events and finds meaning tells you more about that person than it does about the nature of reality. Okay.
Okay.
So in psychology, it's one tool in which to find out what people believe about their reality and
Right. Right.
the nature of their reality. Humans underestimate the chances for coincidence and look for patterns. That's what they do. Humans are pattern seekers, right? And
Yes,
if there are any,
our brains evolved us that way so that we could survive.
yes, it's a survival
But that
mechanism.
doesn't mean the patterns aren't real, though, does it?
It doesn't mean they are or they're not. Either way. So that's where you have to investigate.
Okay.
So humans, that's myth making, where there's chaos and chaos causes stress, and the stress level goes up. And when they make a myth, it lowers the stress threshold so that they can cope. Okay,
Okay.
so that's a little psychology, but
Yeah, I was going to say Psychology 101 with Dr. Dan Vogel.
that was kind of my minor anyway. So I was just going to say about synchronicity and Carl Jung. Carl Jung.
There he is, the man.
Yeah, his
Memories, dreams, and
autobiography. I
wishes.
read this way back in my early 20s. And in Carl Jung, symbols of
Transformation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a good one. This is pretty good, actually. Answer to Job. It's a little book. It's really interesting reading, but it's been so many years since I read it. Anyway, so Carl Jung and his collective unconsciousness, synchronicity type stuff.
Okay.
He likes to show. Let's see if I can find some pictures at random here. What he will do is to show similar motifs among different people, humans.
Okay.
You know, crosses. Here's a cross, and we've seen this in apologetic works. I don't know if you can see it. It's
That's pretty good.
the Mayan tree of life, actually.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
But it's in the shape of a cross, and a lot of early Christian Catholic fathers and whatever priests came to Central America and said that they had Christianity in America at one time.
They misunderstood the cosmological meaning of that symbolism, meaning the cross of the equinox above them in the sky.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Anthony Aveni talks about that a lot in his books. Yeah.
So there's that, and that's Carl Jung, and that's how he kind of tried to prove his collective unconsciousness theory, which is not too different than this is one fold and one shepherd.
Oh yeah, my hero, Thomas Stewart Ferguson.
Yeah, Ferguson.
That burned my bosom so
I got this
bad
when I was a kid.
Some medicine.
This book was owned by my grandma, Villa Vogel.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, she gave it to me. But I just loved this book when I was in high school. But
yeah, I think we all did. Yeah, I wasn't too far behind you.
I had the proof. My religion was based on evidence. Okay.
There you go.
So he shows all these crosses, and so instead of showing the collective unconscious, he uses the same kind of evidence to show transoceanic diffusion, right, between the old world and the new world.
Right.
So, and that's what we're dealing with. It's not very good way to go about science or history. And we all know about parallelomania, right? And Sandmill's.
I've never heard of it. I don't think he really indulged in that.
Everybody's heard it. You've heard it.
We never did that. Dan Peterson never did that. John Gee certainly is never guilty of that.
Oh, Nibley. So Nibley.
I'm just saying.
Finding parallels, thousands of years across any country. So anyway, that's we can, our parallels can get out of hand, we start seeing things, and it's like the
So are you proposing that they're taking their parallels too strongly? I
just
mean, you have to have some parallels. You can't just eliminate them. Otherwise, you have no valid way of seeing causation, right? I mean,
yeah. And so the comparative method, the famous Nibley quote is, the closer the parallel, the closer the connection. So you have to find them in a context, and not just isolated. And
well, I don't know if they're isolating parallels as much as saturating them, showing that everywhere you turn in Joseph Smith's life, there is something involved in Masonic. And that is because of the basis of the historical era. I mean, that was the murder of Dale Morgan.
William Morgan.
William. I meant William. Dale Morgan. He's the historian, isn't he?
Yeah, well,
I've got his book, by the way. I'm serious. You think I'm kidding, don't you? Dale Morgan, right there, baby.
Yeah, there you are. Signature book.
I'm just saying. Yeah, I meant William. But see, with the history being saturated with Masonry, seriously, it would be inevitable that would have to. I mean, they constantly talked about it. I've gotten that from other books besides this one.
Well,
so I don't know if they would be guilty of over parallels.
No, I would agree that Joe Smith couldn't escape it, and he would be influenced by it, even in parts where he didn't even know. Okay, so, but it doesn't mean that everything you look for anything that is remotely similar.
Right.
You have to be careful about overdoing it. That's why you get the parallel mania thing with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Christians, some Christians went crazy with it,
Right.
So there's my friend Nick with his, side.
He's going to take it to task for bringing up Jung. He is the doctor in Jungian psychology,
Okay.
And that he's pretty good with it.
I prefer Freud.
I'm just saying. I'm not going to take him on. If you want to, you go ahead. Not right now, but I will moderate that discussion.
I'm not a big Freudian either. I'm more into family systems theory, as Nick probably already knows.
Right.
So let's go off of.
We have been accused of dissecting the only true gospel of the Mormon Church. So there you have it. I'm just saying. So keep going. Dan is not done yet.
No.
We are exploring the historical aspects.
So examples of meta-narrative in the book. They quote, read Durham. Aspects of Masonic legend seem transformed into history of Joseph Smith, so much so that it appears to be a kind of symbolic acting out of Masonic lore.
Okay.
And he mentioned the coming forth of the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith's death, even. The authors add the first vision and other events, just about everything in Joseph Smith's life. Symbol is not merely, to quoting Jack Adamson, symbol is not merely transformed into Joseph Smith's inner history, but goes beyond metaphor, and the symbol merges into tragic reality. Masonry would thus influence the Mormon restoration from Vermont to New York, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois. This Masonic technique of midrash affected the way Smith explained his own experiences in restoring true Masonry from his first vision to his presidential campaign.
Now, who is this you're reading?
These are the authors of this book.
Oh, okay.
Every one of these.
Okay.
The fact they pepper their text with these kinds of statements. The fact that the continued reliance of Christian Freemasonry was debated by Masons may be one reason Smith saw a need for its restoration, and he would make it his life's work to recover what he considered lost and missing aspects of religion and Freemasonry in order to restore them to a prominent place in the lives of his associates. The Masonic timing of his prophetic nature of his birth may have led his family to believe him to be the fulfillment of a legendary Masonic restorer who would aid him in their research, their search for the lost word. Now, this is talking about near his birth. They're looking to their son to restore, because he was born 4 days before St. John's
St. John's,
Day.
yeah.
St. John's Day.
Right.
And so, referring to the repeated declaration of Joseph Sr. in the mid-1820s that his son would bring forth a book about pre-flood people hiding their treasures in underground chambers, the authors linked this to Enoch's legend, the Masonic, or either Masonic or Josephus, who knows which, and then state its connection with Masonic lore is further evidence that local residents viewed Father Smith as having promoted his son as a Masonic restorer. And this is talking about before he even gets the plates. Joseph Smith Sr. is promoting Joseph Smith Jr. as a Masonic restorer.
What year would that have been? What year did they say it was?
It's not certain, but it's kind of and the quote that they give a quote. It's Abner Cole gives the quote, and if we might get to it in here, I'll talk about it more specifically again. But
okay,
it's before 1827.
Okay. So
before he gets
Book of Mormon. Yeah,
and because of this one comment about chambers and holding treasures, which is not just the gold plates, but a golden throne hidden in this cave. And the early accounts, as I will get to it, is that the plates held knowledge about where these caverns were, multiple caverns and treasures were to be found, and that's where he was going to use the gold plates before it became a religious record of any kind. This is according to Abner Cole. It was about treasure digging, not about Enoch's plates or plate. So,
treasure diggers.
Well, as I was saying, even before he started dictating the Book of Mormon, he had no plan to found a church, to be a restorer of religion. The book was to be confound, false doctrine and bring the existing churches into conformity with true doctrine. In March 1829, Joseph's aspirations were still modest, desiring only that his book act as a reformation, a catalyst among the already churched. Originally, the Revelation, D&C 5, as we have it in the Doctrine and Covenants, when it was first published in the Book of Commandments, had a passage in it that was taken out and replaced with another.
No.
Yeah.
What was it? What did it say? They always did that with the good revelations, didn't they? Dang it.
Yeah. So March 1829, this is a month before Cowdery comes in April to become the scribe. It's after the loss of the 116-page manuscript.
Okay.
And it's in between that. And Martin Harris comes to Pennsylvania to seek a greater witness. He wants to see the plates.
Ah, yes. Don't
yeah.
So what was the revelation that they took out? What did it say?
So it says this: If the people of this generation harden not their hearts, I will work a reformation among them. And I will put down all lyings and deceivings and priestcrafts and envyings and strifes and idolatries and sorceries and all manner of iniquities. And I will establish my church like unto the church which was taught by my disciples in days of old. So, and it was replaced with one that was more restorationist. This in 1835, that is. It was replaced with one that had more restoration, the restoration of the church, which is says the Book of Mormon is to come forth and become the beginning of the rising up and the coming forth out of the wilderness, clear as the moon and fair as the sun and terrible as an army with banners. So the church is in the wilderness. It went away entirely, and it's going to come back. So
this is one of your contentions of why it wasn't necessarily Freemasonry Joseph Smith was interested in restoring it all. It was the church.
How can he have a view that he's going to be the great Masonic restorer when he doesn't even have a view of restoring the church? The same revelation also said he has a gift to it's telling Harris, he has a gift to translate the book, and I have commanded him that he shall pretend to no other gift, for I grant unto him no other gift. That was changed to, you have a gift to translate the plates, and this is the first gift that I bestow upon you, and I have commanded that you shall pretend to no other gift until it is finished.
Okay.
So the plan is changed drastically. Well, by 1835, it's apparently it has changed. So he changed the revelation to conform with his current views of what his mission is.
So he's updating.
Yeah. So
it's a good thing he would have went out of date like modern Mormonism is if he didn't.
Well, they're just doing what Joseph Smith did, changing things. Now I want to talk about contradiction and the idealist fallacy. Let's review what I was talking about there. I had pointed out that the authors justify their use of pure and spurious masonry to avoid a contradiction between the Book of Mormon's apparent anti-Masonic rhetoric and Joseph Smith's apparent embrace of Masonry and Nauvoo. I mean, everybody notices that as a contradiction, and that's the first question they ask is, well, if the Book of Mormon's anti-Masonic, why did he embrace Masonry and Nauvoo? So they argue that the Book of Mormon is only anti-spurious Masonry. I discussed the idealist fallacy, or the assumption that Joseph Smith would not contradict himself. Therefore, the Book of Mormon can't be anti-Masonic. In other words, the avoidance of the contradiction is used to justify explaining away the contradiction. Here it is important to note that the authors are using the pure spurious labels in their own way that is different than what was intended by George Oliver. The authors provide no evidence that anyone in the 1820s used it as they do. There might be, but I didn't see it in their
book. George Oliver's stuff?
That people were using the spurious and pure masonry to current Masons within the institution. So that's why I say there's no one in the 1820s that used it as they claim Joseph Smith is using it.
Right.
That is to distinguish between pure and spurious Masons within the Masonic institution itself. The way the authors use spurious to explain the Book of Mormon is their own invention. And that's pretty much explained in the book, that they're applying Oliver's categories because they think it describes the same activity in the Book of Mormon, which I don't believe it does, but they what I'm saying is they admit that this is a idiosyncratic kind of use of George Oliver, but it's not. I mean, it actually comes from Clyde Forsberg's book. He argued the same thing. He gave some similar reasons why the Book of Mormon might be seen as pro-Masonic, but they never referred to his treatment about the Book of Mormon or anything else. They mentioned Forsberg in the introduction, but then they forget about the book. And that book is look
at this. He's doing that more than I am. You're putting me to shame doing this, Vogel.
Equal Rights.
Clyde Forsberg.
The late.
Equal Rights.
Hard to say.
And what year was that book written?
The late Clyde Forsberg. I forget. 2004.
2004.
Same year as my book. Same year as my book. Okay. So, I also said that the urge to harmonize was what apologists do, and that historians try to exploit contradictions. They live with the contradiction, and they use it to find this development of thought. Both Nick and Cheryl thought I was calling them apologists, but I was not. I wasn't even saying their book was apologetic. I'm not even saying their book is apologetic. I'm just saying, so you come to a contradiction, not only is it the idealist fallacy, but it's also there's no need to harmonize. Historians don't feel an urge to harmonize things. The urge comes from another place. Okay, let's see. Hold on. One last thing, one last item, and we'll get on with the work.
Okay. Hey, I think you're doing fine.
The lost word.
The lost word. Okay.
So I was having difficulty with this lost word. The lost word is spoken about in their book. Ooh, must be
a lot.
20 times.
Yeah.
So okay, here's it. 20 times right here. I circled these and I went through.
Man, you do as bad as I do in your books.
I went through each one trying to figure out what's this lost word. Okay, well, Nick gave me a little hint, and it was on 317.
317. Let's go to 317. You want me to read something?
Oh, yeah, if you want. It's a neat little quote from William Clayton's journal.
Oh, William Clayton Journal up there toward the top?
Yeah.
Yeah. This was June 15th, 1844.
That's right. If you can read it, go ahead.
Sure. Joseph Smith spoke concerning key words. The grand keyword was the first word Adam spoke and is a word of supplication. He found the word by the Urim and Thummim. It is that keyword to which the heavens is open. That sounds familiar. I'll bet I know that word.
Okay, so the authors say that
Really?
they're going to try to be respectful of the secrets of both groups.
Sure.
And so they never mention what the key word is.
Right.
I kept looking, well, what is the key word? Well, you know, and I
Yeah,
figured
you were kind of hinting that last week. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to be, how can he be a restorer if you're going to actually restore the big enchilada, you know? And so,
Well,
so
you're assuming he's going to restore it to the world,
or at all, you know.
but he did claim to do that.
So I couldn't figure out. Okay, where's this key word thing? And then Cheryl says on Mormonism Live, well, we think they lost it again, and I'm thinking, you know, how can that be? That's a convenient excuse. But then I did some research, you know, and I well, of course I know.
That's what we love about you. You keep doing research.
Of course I know what the 3-syllable word is.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm not going to mention it either out of respect for Mormons. Okay.
I agree. To not mention.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Right. So I went online and I found that somebody that is not as respectful, maybe, that has the transcript of the whole thing, and notes the pre-1990 version and as opposed to the post-1990 version. And these words, to my bafflement, were removed. So I'm wondering, is that what Cheryl meant?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that what Cheryl meant?
Isn't it?
When she says they lost it again, I mean, to future generations that won't research it, you know? And so if that's what she meant, that's fine. But I still think they should have said something specific that it was these words Joseph Smith included in the endowment, but that we're not going to talk about it out of respect or some sort of thing. So the reader is not going, well, where is this? Where is this totally incomplete feeling about, you know, they're talking about this like 20 times. They mention the word, the key word, the, you know, the name of God and all that kind of stuff. And that it never happens. So
no, it's not that it never happened. It's that it wasn't given
in
to
the book. It never happens in the book.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It never happens in the book. You're reading, the book is like a world in itself and self-contained. It has to work by itself. You can't rely on outside things. So they should have mentioned that.
Okay. Nick's disagreeing with you.
Okay. Yeah, he doesn't think those were the words. Well, I do. I think that's Joseph Smith, what he's talking about there. I know there's this other one that they also mention, which makes it even more confusing, that there's two different, seems like there's two different things. So, which they didn't take out, which is not complete either. It's not a name, and it's not a 3-syllable name, the thing he's thinking of. It is 3 syllables in the Masonic thing, but not in the Mormon thing. The Mormon thing is like a paragraph. Anyway, anyway, so there's that.
Yeah, it is interesting how through the process of restoring it, it was actually, it's not that it was maintained pristinely as restored. It was changed through time. And see, this is one of my arguments of why, unfortunately, I honestly don't think today's church has Joseph Smith's vision at all. Somewhere along the line, there's been a major disconnect. And of course, leave it to one of the prophets within Wilford Woodruff to be the one to say, well, the Lord will never allow us to lead you astray. It's not in his program. So that's circular, how do you know that? Well, because I said so, because the Lord told me. And yet we're missing one of the crucial pieces of information. So, we could spend a whole hour talking
No,
about
but
that.
you see, if they got readers confused, maybe they should think about revising the book and making some things a little more clear. Because it is the author's responsibility to be clear, not the reader's responsibility. To read a paragraph at the beginning and not know the answer until you read the whole book. So I realize, it's their first book and all, but now we're ready to start some new stuff. We're going to start at the end of chapter 1, I think, where there's a paragraph we didn't read. Yeah, I'm trying to find. Oh, page 14.
Page 14.
Yeah. No, here it is. If Smith held the view of Town, Hutchinson, and Oliver regarding authentic and spurious Masonry, and his own inspired revisions of the Bible suggest that he did, which I would dispute, this, because it's more anti-Masonic, this might significantly alter our understanding of his recorded statements on Freemasonry. It suggests the possibility that Smith's remarks, behaviors, and perspectives on Masonry were consistent and fundamentally unchanged throughout his prophetic ministry. That's a key phrase, too, right there.
Okay.
With such view, Smith could have condemned what he saw as false or spurious Masonry while championing a pure and restored version of the craft, just as he did Christianity as a whole. But that's not what he did with Christianity as a whole. And we saw how he changed his approach too. But he didn't restore Christianity as a whole. He restored the true church. He didn't restore, like I said before, he didn't restore Methodism or Presbyterianism. But we have it's the analogy that's attempted to be made here is not working. And the perspective that he remained the same, consistent throughout life, that's the motivation for this meta narrative.
You're saying in this book they're trying to make it more consistent.
The need to make Joseph Smith consistent throughout his whole life is the motivation for creating the spurious and pure Masonry.
So you're disputing that you're disputing there was a spurious as well as a regular Masonry, right? You don't think that there was a spurious Masonry?
Not in the Book of Mormon.
Okay, well, that's what I was at. Your context is that there isn't a spurious Masonry in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah,
right.
And that's not and Oliver and the others were talking about the heathen nations that degenerated and branched off from Masonry. The Egyptians especially, and so this need that Joseph Smith be consistent throughout his whole life is the motivation for creating this idiosyncratic definition of spurious and pure Masonry.
Okay, interesting. Okay. All right. What else you have?
So that's my idealist fallacy thing. Now we're going to go to page 17.
Page 17, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay. Oh, hey, that's the one that has that, that's the one
Wood
that
scrape.
has that really cool picture of that coin.
Oh, yeah, the Vermont coin.
Yeah, that Masonic Vermont coin.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
But at the bottom of this page, they begin talking about Nathaniel Wood and the wood, what is known as the wood scrape eventually. A group of rodsmen in Middletown, Vermont, in the end of the 18th century, or right, their prediction actually was 1802. So they start around 1800, and at the time this wood scrape was going on, the Smiths lived in Tunbridge, about 70 miles away to the east, and Joseph Smith Sr. They moved briefly to Randolph, which is about 55 miles away from this wood scrape. The reason why I mention this is because in 1867, a man named Barnes Frisbee asserted that Joseph Smith Sr. was part of this money digging, rod working group, what they called in the histories, the fraternity of rodsmen. And
with this Woods group.
And also Oliver Cowdery's father, William Cowdery, in actually nearby Wells, Vermont. And the theory is, especially by Mike Quinn, the theory is that that Oliver Cowdery's father was associated with the wood rodsmen, and that he handed down the ability to use the rod to Oliver Cowdery, because when Oliver Cowdery met Joseph Smith, he brought with him a rod that had told him many things. It was called a sprout in the earliest revelation, and when Joseph Smith in the mid 1830s was sanitizing his history, he changed it to eventually to Aaron's rod.
Joseph Smith wouldn't do that.
To try to disguise what kind of rod it was.
So now these guys are utilizing
the gift of Aaron.
This text is utilizing Quinn's interpretation to support that situation where the fathers of Joseph and Oliver were in this Woods group, right, with the rodsman.
Yeah. But
I just wanted to keep clear who's saying what. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, and that is highly doubted, actually, even though Quinn had pushed this or agreed with the interpretation that this historian in 1867 gave of the wood movement.
Right.
But not only that, I mean, Quinn, this was a tie in to rod working and money digging, and associating Joseph Smith Sr. with money digging in Vermont, and Quinn wanted to establish.
Perhaps that's why Quinn called it the early Mormonism and the magic worldview, right? It actually built up his thesis. Yeah. But you don't disagree with Quinn. You don't agree with Quinn, though, do you?
No, yeah, we'll get to that again after we.
All right, I'm not trying to jump the gun.
Try to give the perspective of these authors, that and they see in it something Quinn didn't see, and they see that this group was also Masonic influenced.
Oh, I see how you. Oh, I see where you're going. Yeah. Okay. So you're on page 18.
18.
Right. And hey, by the way, that's you guys.
Oh, There you
It's
are.
got a great picture of
Ethan Allen
Yeah, there's the man.
and the Green Mountain Boys.
And the Green Mountain Boys. Yeah, that's Ethan Allen. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Trying to
Sure.
get some historic pictorial context, Mr. Vogel.
So they say the group was located in Middletown, Rutland County, Vermont, not far from the Smith family homestead. Well, it's 70 miles anyway to
Right.
Tunbridge, which seems a little bit far, which is why Quinn worked really hard to find a Joseph Smith in Pulteney, which is closer, but that was the wrong Joseph Smith, as I showed in my first volume to my early Mormon documents. I included Frisbee's history with footnotes, and I disputed a lot of what Quinn had interpreted and sided more with Richard Anderson on that.
That's Richard Lloyd Anderson, the great
The
Mormon
apologist.
historian. Dan Vogel agreed with the Mormon apologist.
Yeah, sometimes I told you. Sometimes
I'm
I
just
agree
saying,
with
we
them.
can't totally write him off.
So I thought Quinn was a little reckless there in believing this 1867 history.
When did you say you put that in your early Mormon documents book?
I have I have the whole section of Frisbee's Barnes Frisbee's history of Middletown, Vermont, in 3 discourses. So, with footnotes, in a section of my document collection dealing with the Smiths in Vermont and New Hampshire. Right. So they think that Smith's close, and Quinn tried to get them closer in Pulteney. And this, I did some research in this various censuses, and I found that the same Joseph Smith in Pulteney was there after this period of time.
After the wood scrape?
After the wood scrape, he was
still there.
You're
saying that historical
way
material...
after the Smiths had moved in other places and was definitely...
So that would not be Joseph Sr.
Right, not them at all. So they're too far. They're some other researchers in Masonry agree with this, don't agree with the authors. But known as the Fraternity of Rodsmen, this band of mystics held several beliefs derived from Masonry, especially the Crafts Royal Arch tradition.
Okay.
So now they're going to try to establish that these Rodsmen, and it's not mentioned in any of these documents that talk about this group of Rodsmen. No one ever mentions Masonry in association with this group, only this book. Okay. And how they get that, they held several beliefs derived from Masonry. Okay. Mm-hmm. Wood's followers began using divining rods to ascertain the mind of God, and Wood received a revelation that they must build a temple. An esoteric practice, our authors say, rooted both in the Bible and in Masonic tradition and allegory. Well, this must build a temple. Okay. This is Frisbee. Okay. And the Frisbee says temple in 1867, but in 1828, the Rodsman article about the same group in 1828 doesn't name the structure, but says it was then used as a barn, but was originally intended to contain a furnace for smelting and refining the ore found in the hills with the rods. Okay, so As a religious exercise, the wood scrape also made excavations in local mountains from which valuable ore was to be taken. Our authors add, recalling the subterranean cavern of Masonic legend wherein lay the gold plate of Enoch. Well, where does this connection come from? I mean, you can't dig in the mountains without recalling the legend of Enoch.
There's the subterranean,
Yeah, there's our subterranean.
the nine different the nine different arch. Oh, hold it. I gotta shut that banner off. No, that's not the banner. Sorry, that's the comment. Sorry, I'm taking your comment off, pal. There we go. There's the nine chambers, and it shows the that gold tablet of Enoch.
The delta, the golden tablet of Enoch that is also encrusted with jewels. So it doesn't remind you of any gold plates, but here are the 9 arches of the Royal Arch degree, legend, or whatever. Thing I can't figure out.
There's another artistic version of it.
How they
I don't see the
remove
tablet in this one, though.
Yeah, turn it back to the what's inside, probably the chest. But there, yeah. How did they remove the keystone without it collapsing?
They were the ones that built it. They could easily remove it.
I don't know. But that's the legend. But
that is the legend.
How is it that you get this every time there's money digging? Every time people are digging in the hills, it recalls the Enoch legend.
Yeah, here's actually the close-up of that Enoch triangle.
Yeah, and it has the tetragrammaton in the center,
right?
In Hebrew, Yahweh, and
then we've got
the cipher, the Royal Arch cipher, holiness to the Lord, kind of supposed to be. So, so I'm saying the connection that they're making here to prove that this group was also Masonic, and the Enoch legend, and Joseph Senior belonging to it, and learning about the Royal Arch thing here, maybe, is really a stretch for me. Might be for you too out there.
The connection with the Enoch legend, you mean? The digging and the Masonic material?
Yep. So it's a little much of a stretch. None of the sources mention Masonry, so the Masonic connection is a little nebulous here. Also reminiscent of the Royal Arch tradition, Wood instructed his followers that they were descendants of the ancient Jews and lawful inheritors of the whole country, and that the divining rods would designate who they were. So what we have here is a group that sees themselves as, let's say, an American Israelite group, sort of like the British Israelites in a way, but in America. I mean, it's no different than what the Puritans viewed themselves as. But these people are divining what tribe you're from using a divining rod, asking, "Are you from this tribe?" And then the rod dips, and that is a sign that that's the correct tribe. Okay. Then Jacob Wood, one of the sons of Nathaniel Wood, prophesied by means of one of these divining rods that that he named St. John's rod.
Right.
In Royal Arch Masonry, our authors tell us that Aaron's rod, which budded and blossomed and brought forth flowers in a single day, is connected with the concept of restoration, and the figure of St. John has an important role in Masonry. They observe St. John's Day, which happens to be 4 days before Joseph Smith was born. So, according to these authors here, so
Mhm.
the St. John's rod, though, might be associated with John the Revelator because the rod is predicting the destruction, apocalypse, and all that stuff.
Right.
But Alan Taylor, who wrote several great articles on money digging in early America, he's a non-Mormon. Said he wrote that
When was he writing? When did he write his materials?
well, this article I'm reading from is 1986.
Oh,
He
so
got involved during the Hoffman forgery era, and it was published in articles associated with money digging in the American Quarterly
Oh,
and
okay.
other places. The early Republic's supernatural economy, treasure seeking in the American Northeast, 1780 to 1830. So he says that the Woods called their divining rod St. John's rod. This probably reflects survival of a folk tradition originating in 17th century Germany that rods had to be cut on St. John's Day. What should be remembered too, and it's not discussed here by these authors, is that these American Israelites also observed the Passover, destroying angels, writing on doorposts, "Jesus is our Passover," etc. They were doing all sorts of things that were Jewish. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Well, they were trying to tie into Israel. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a large.
Joseph Smith did a few things that were pretty Jewish, somewhat, or at least they later like when Elijah came back, it was ended up being on Passover, stuff like that. So interesting. Yeah. They even called themselves the Latter-day Saints.
They called themselves the Latter-day Saints.
And
that's
made
right.
liberal use of Masonic millennialism.
They thought that, they used the rod. They predicted that the end of the world, apocalyptic event anyway.
January 14th, 1802.
Yeah, and it didn't happen, and so they kind of went out of existence shortly thereafter.
That's
And it
that
was
wood
known as the wood
issue,
scrape.
isn't it? Yeah.
The wood scrape. So then there's this belief, as I say, from Barnes Frisbee, that Joseph Smith Sr. and William Cowdery were part of this group, and that they handed it down to their sons, this working the rod. And this was all based on speculation of Barnes Frisbee. He interviewed all the old people in Middletown, and he didn't get this part of the story from them. Okay, this is things he surmised, and maybe some others surmised, when they heard the Mormon missionaries preaching the gospel. They thought, oh, this is a lot similar to these American Israelite group that was here, and they probably heard stories of the money digging that the Smiths had done. By 1867, of course, it was widely known.
Yeah.
So
that's where, yeah. So from Frisbee's interviews from all these different guys, and then he later wrote, that's where Quinn's getting his information, isn't it?
yeah, so all the same sources.
Yeah.
But he, like I said, he was trying to prove Joseph Smith Sr.'s involvement in using rods and money digging in Vermont.
Quinn was.
Yeah.
That's where you disagreed with him.
Yeah, I'm sure Joseph Smith Sr. was involved with the cult kind of practices in Vermont, because
that's not what you're disputing.
There's other testimonies. There's other testimonies in regard to that, but his
Right.
connection with this group is really very, very weak and should have been approached with extreme caution by itself. Besides trying to connect it to Masonry makes it even more out there historically. So I think that's
Okay.
good enough for that. Now, more on a positive regard of the book is their discussion on page 22.
The discussion on page 22, positives. Hey, this is another good visual.
Yeah, it's about Justice Smith.
That is a good visual.
Yeah, there's a little map. You can't really see it all that well, but
Hard to see, huh?
yeah. And they moved around. They moved around in Vermont and then New Hampshire and back to Vermont. But our authors here talk about the federal lodge that Joseph Smith applied to for membership, but was turned down. This is in Tunbridge, and he was failed. And this is a discussion that was kind of new to me here, and I thought this is an interesting part because he was turned down, and they speculate, and I think, for what reasons? There's several reasons you can get, fail to get membership, but one of them is the abuse of alcohol. This is he overindulged. This is
word of wisdom time. Yeah, I'm just saying. Dean say 89. If they had just read that, it'd have been cool.
That was their chief reason, perhaps, and there might have been others, but I note that I like that being blackballed or whatever you want to call it. On page 28, we talk about Hiram Smith and the apparent naming of Hiram being from Joseph Smith Sr., maybe could have been Lucy, but Joseph Smith Sr.'s interest in Masonry may have led to Hiram's name. And I thought this discussion also was interesting, where they talk about how many names in the census of children at this time were named Hiram.
Yeah.
And
that was fun to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job on that. But I would note that with this name in his birth record, it's spelled with an I and not a Y, Hiram instead of HYRUN.
Yeah.
And there, somewhere I read, I can't exactly remember where it was, but there's this idea that after the Morgan affair in 1826, people named Hiram changed the spelling from.
Oh, and they're tying this into the Hiram Abiff idea because that was prominent in the Masonic thing too. And then of course, after the Morgan affair and Freemasonry got a black eye, people are gonna quit naming their children Hiram.
Yeah.
So that actually made a lot of sense to me too.
So naming Hiram in 1800, they believe shows an interest in Masonry on Joseph Smith Sr.'s part, assuming it was Joseph Smith Sr. that named Hiram. But the change from Hiram to Hiram is a sign that, could it be a sign that he renounced his Masonic affiliation after the Morgan affair? The earliest Hiram with the Y spelling is 1829 testimony of the 8 witnesses.
Yeah.
So I throw that out there as maybe some possibility to think about. What the larger question is that the larger question is, when the Morgan affair took place, did that affect Hiram's opinion about Masonry, or even just Smith Sr.'s opinion about Masonry?
It would have had to have.
Where did they become disaffected also with
Well,
uh,
wasn't that when
many people that
Phelps
did?
and those guys? I mean, Phelps was the anti-Masonic publisher for sure,
Yeah,
and the other gentleman what's the Martin
Reed.
Harris. Martin
Oh,
Harris called the Book of Mormon the anti-Masonic Bible, stuff like that. So,
yeah. So, and a lot of lodges had to close down due
and a
to
lot of lodges had, yeah, and there
yeah,
was a lot of furor in the newspapers, as these guys rightly recalled as well.
yeah. The
So,
Palmyra Mount Moriah Lodge closed down in 1835, finally,
yeah.
and the Ontario Lodge in Canandaigua closed down in 1832. So, were they among those who, changed their views of Masonry? That is a question to think about.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, page 30.
What about this?
Oh,
Oh, we already talked about the triangular on page 30. What else did you find that you liked? I thought this was kind of cool.
we'll come back. Oh, so this page on page 30 at the top, Joseph Smith reportedly found an allure in the legendary Captain Kidd's pirate treasure, and he passed
Oh,
his
hey,
interest
Captain
on to
Kidd.
his
I've got a
son.
picture of that.
That's
Let's
quite
look at it.
quite possible.
Keep talking.
How that worked. Yeah, there we go. Under the influence of Masonic legend and physical environment in Vermont, with all the mountains and things, there is little wonder that the Smiths would take an active interest in treasure digging. So, this is where I kind of wince, because they're saying under the influence of Masonic legend, uh, they became interested in treasure digging rather than digging treasures, becoming interested in Mason, maybe the Enoch legend, you know. Um,
Hmm.
what is in Masonry that makes them want to be money diggers? So, except the Enoch legend, are they looking for Enoch's plate in America? Why would they be? What is the connection? It doesn't seem how they slip from one
The
thing to the
tablet,
other. Yeah, is a little loose.
gold triangular plate. That's the connection.
Oh, there we are. There's a
Yeah,
that.
there's
Oh,
the,
we already discussed that.
yep.
Joseph Smith Sr.'s masonry led to money digging, connected money digging to Enoch's plate is not in evidence. It's not in evidence. They're talking about things before it's even demonstrated, or there is no demonstration of it. It's just assumption.
Hmm.
Um, Joseph Smith Sr. Isn't a Mason at this time. He failed to get
He failed
Masonic.
to get past. Yeah, he got blackballed, didn't he?
So what is Masonry making him want to money dig for if he is not even a Mason? Um, there was an overt Masonic quality to this activity of money digging, because Masons are interested in the recovery of a lost sacred word once engraved upon a triangular plate of gold. So the connection between money digging and the plate of Enoch, what is this? I mean, where do they get this connection? There's nothing. He's digging for money. That's it. How is there some sort of organic connection between money digging and Enoch's plate? Uh, Thus, the Smiths' treasure seeking was connected with a sacred holy meaning from the beginning.
Hmm.
Well, what? So then I will leave that as very loose connection being made here, no evidence, no source, and a weak construction of an argument. They talk about Joseph Smith being born 4 days before St. John the Evangelist, that he was born with a cowl over his head, a veil over his face, that is supposed to show that a special gift of seership. So that is in the sources. The Masonic timing of Joseph Smith's birth. I mean, who gets the connection 4 days before St. John's Day with Masonry? That's so loose.
Okay.
So the Masonic timing and prophetic nature of Joseph Smith Jr.'s birth may have led his family to believe him to be the fulfillment of a legendary Masonic restorer who would aid in their search for the lost word. It's just too remote to make any be a cogent argument for other historians to want to follow this kind of thinking.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's all I will say at that point. Then on page 33, did Joseph Smith Sr. join the Ontario Lodge in Canandaigua instead of the Palmyra Lodge, or Palmyra's Mount Moriah Lodge? Now, they assert that Joseph Smith Sr.'s definitely joined the Canandaigua Lodge, but that he didn't go to the nearest lodge where Hiram joined, the Mount Moriah Lodge in Palmyra, for various reasons. I tried to
find pictures of that, and I couldn't do it. That Ontario Lodge, that's a tough one to find pictures of. I don't know why. Oh, well. I wanted to give us some historical context, you know.
Yeah. So the Palmyra Mount Moriah Lodge was founded in 1804, as they know. It wasn't. They say it wasn't. It was a newer lodge, and not as old as the Canandaigua Lodge, and so it had less time to accumulate the paraphernalia that added luster to the degrees. So that's one reason why he chose Canandaigua. But 1804 to 1817, there's not enough time to accumulate paraphernalia. I mean, how do you even start without it? But the lodge was created in response to a joint petition from brothers in two townships, Palmyra and Phelps, 12 miles east of Palmyra and 13 miles from Canandaigua. For the first few years of its existence, the lodge met alternatively in the two towns. Had he petitioned this lodge, Joseph Sr. would have needed the unanimous affirmative vote of members from two communities for admission. Well, the problem with that argument is that this alternating between two towns ended in 1807. Before Joseph Sr. even got there, they weren't meeting in two places. They were just meeting in Palmyra. So they wouldn't need to get the permission from both places. Plus, another barrier is that Joseph Smith Sr. is still a problem drinker at this time.
Right. Hold on, I got to wave to RFM. He doesn't know who I am.
Oh. Hi, RFM.
He's asking who's the dork on the left-hand side.
Thanks for showing up. So, well, RFM is happy that Nick is commenting, and so am I.
Yeah.
And so am I.
I haven't
Okay.
seen a lot of comments of Nick, but I've been trying to post them so that we have the context of his discussion too. So this is awesome.
Yes. Yeah. I'll read them carefully afterwards, Nick.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um.
So you were talking about
There's no reason to go to Canandaigua.
Right.
Okay. Smith lived in Palmyra Village and didn't move south. Also, they assumed that the Smiths were living near the Manchester Palmyra Township line, south of
Good. We've got Cheryl taking
road.
notes. We've got Cheryl taking notes. So make sure you are historically accurate, young man. No, are you leading up to this chart, Dan?
I'm going to get there.
Oh, okay.
Not just yet.
I won't put it up yet. Yep. All right.
Okay, but I'm almost there.
Oh, it's all good. It's all
Although Ontario Lodge in Canandaigua was located approximately 12 miles from the Smith home on the Palmyra-Manchester border, it was clearly the older and more prestigious of the two. Okay, so the Smiths lived in Palmyra Village and did not move south near the Palmyra-Manchester border and occupied Samuel Jennings' cabin, by the way, until sometime between April 1819 and April 1820, according to the road lists, and didn't contract for the Manchester land until 1820. So Main Street, Palmyra, is 13.5 to 14 miles from Canandaigua, not 12. Right. Okay, so
right.
It's a small matter, but thought I would point that out.
It's all good. Yep.
So this is where they say, without any equivocation.
What page?
Oh, 34.
Okay. All right.
The next page. A search of the Mount Moriah Lodge's records has not revealed the induction of Joseph Smith Sr., but he does appear on the records of Ontario Lodge 23. Well, there's a Joseph Smith appears in those records for 1818. Whether it's our Joseph Smith is less certain. They should have been a little more careful with their wording. After below, they go on to also talk about other Joseph Smiths in the 1820 census. 9 other Joseph Smiths.
I was going to say there's quite a few of them, aren't there?
Yeah, show the chart now.
Yeah, okay, here we go.
Closer.
I'm trying.
You're trying to read it.
This stupid camera. I think
there you
it's
go.
The operator.
Well, it lists Farmington, Seneca, Mendon, Richmond, Benton, Jerusalem, Enfield, Avon. And it gives mileage from the Ontario Canandaigua Lodge. 8 miles, 11 miles, 15, 16, 19, 21, 24. Okay, so, and then they make the argument that since our Joseph Smith is the closest, it's probably him mentioned in the Canandaigua list. But that's no certain thing at all, because on the previous page they argue themselves that some of those in the Mount Moriah Lodge, when they checked the census, some of these people that attended that lodge were far away as Lyons. They were further from Palmyra than Palmyra was from Canandaigua. So here they have example of people attending the lodge at Palmyra that are further away than the Smiths were from Canandaigua. So the closest person thing really doesn't really make any sense anymore. But since we're talking about 15 miles, 14, 15 miles
Right.
To Canandaigua, there are people closer than the Smiths, actually. So their argument from the person closest is probably the one in Canandaigua. There's an 8 miles. They're 15 or 14 to 15 probably.
Right.
8. There's 8, 11, 15, miles away. So
that's quite a distance to travel just to go to lodge,
Yeah.
I mean, I had enough trouble jumping in my car and driving 7 miles up the road to get to mine in the winter, especially. So I can't.
Well, one problem is that the record is saying that he was in 1817 or 1818, let's say. It's 2 years from the census taking. Okay.
Uh-huh. You got a question from Dr. Latursky.
And so when you look in the 1820 census,
oh yeah, you got the census. Show it.
There is no Joseph Smith living in Canandaigua, and this has, the thing is that here, let's look at this.
Look at this. This is BYP style stuff right here, baby.
Joseph Smith. This is the Canandaigua returns from the Ontario Lodge. 1818. But see that Joseph Smith right there?
Yeah.
Okay. So go this way.
Right.
Residence. Canandaigua. Ditto. And some people, they argue, our authors argue, oh, it's just copied. Some of the people don't seem, going by the 1820 census, don't actually live there. They live in other places, but people are moving around. And so, but they try to say the scribe is not being careful. That's not an obvious conclusion, but go this way a little bit and then I can't see what I'm looking at. Okay. But it has the dates of being entered, apprentice, passed, and raised. Okay, the dates. So, and the dates are, this Joseph Smith was initiated in December 26, 1817, made fellow craft in May 2nd, 1818, and became a master mason May 7th, 1818. Okay, so it says that they live there. He lives there. That's all I know. Okay, it could be wrong, but all I have is this record, and their argument isn't all that great because the census is 2 years later. Okay, the census is 2 years later, and I checked a little bit of the land records about a month ago when I was reading this, and the land records have the Farmington Joseph, that's 8 miles away, had just purchased that farm in 1820. So there is some moving around. A lot of people move to a central town like Canandaigua is on the road, main thoroughfare, and then they move from there. They move out. Okay, so but we have 9 Joseph Smiths, and not a good argument for it being our Joseph Smith. Therefore, they should not say unequivocally, but he does appear on the records of the or Ontario Lodge 23. He does. Well, a Joseph Smith appears. Not he does appear. Okay. So
hey, I just noticed something.
Yeah, Nick.
I've been having so much fun learning your view of things on this that we have been going 2 hours and I didn't even realize
Okay.
it. Shall we call that last? Do you have something else you'd
You
like
can
to?
quit anytime you want. You're in charge.
Well, I'm enjoying this. I think everybody else is. This is enormously interesting to me. But I'll tell you what. Why don't we that's a good stopping spot, isn't it? Right there. This is not necessarily our Joseph Smith in this lodge.
Well, maybe I should finish at least the Hiram up to the membership or
Oh, Doug Vincent says keep going. So keep going a little bit. Let's do some more.
go
Do
a
some
little
more on
bit
Hiram Smith.
on the rest of the family, the membership of the rest of the family.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. So
Okay, so let me ask you this, page 35. I just want to be clear on your approach, your understanding.
okay.
They say since Masonic lodges did not initiate transients and would likely not have raised a brother who did not plan a long-term residence in the area, we're left with the residents listed. Okay, that makes sense. While strictly speaking, residents did not determine which lodge a man must attend. The most obvious feature of the list is that in 1820, the closest man to Ontario Lodge number 23 was none other than our Joseph Smith Sr., who was enumerated in Farmington. Is that what you're saying? You don't think it's historically viable, or
Could
is
be
that
him, but we have a 1 in 9 chance of it.
a 1 in 9? I see what you're saying.
It doesn't
Yep.
have to be him. What if he were initiated in the gaps that we have in the the Palmyra record? The Palmyra record that shows Hiram Smith, we have 2 gaps where we think he was initiated during these gaps, even though there's a Hiram Smith later. Okay, and the gaps are June 1820 to 21 and December to December 1822 to 23. What if the Joseph Smith Sr. was initiated at the same time Hiram was?
That's interesting. His dad and his son together? That would almost make sense, wouldn't it? That's interesting.
So that's another possibility. What if he was never a Mason?
Who, Senior?
Yeah. Now we know Hiram was only, and we suspect that Hiram mentioned in the record, but not necessarily, is our Hiram, because Heber C. Kimball had mentioned that Hiram had been initiated into Masonry in Ontario, New York. So since we know that, okay, we have that as evidence that he was initiated in Ontario, New York.
Right.
Then when you go to the record and you see Hiram's name, you have a good argument for that could, not necessarily positively, but that could be our Hiram.
Okay.
Okay, we have no such thing about Joseph Smith Sr. We have no information that Joseph Smith Sr. joined Masonry ever. All we have is this Canandaigua record that mentions a Joseph Smith. That's it. So we're on different grounds when we're dealing with Joseph Smith Sr. than we are with Hiram Smith.
Yeah, yeah. All right, yeah, that's a good clarification. I like that. Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting. So we don't have a record at all of Joseph Smith Sr. ever becoming a Mason? Am I understanding that right?
Heber C. Kimball didn't say Joseph Smith Sr. was a member or was initiated. We don't have anybody else anywhere saying that he was, so that when we look at the Canandaigua record, we might go, oh, we can't that could be our Joseph Smith Sr. We would
But
have
there's one in 9, like you're
a
saying.
little more to hold on to, a toehold of some kind. With Joseph Smith Sr., we really don't. We're just guessing. It's a wish.
Okay. There's Cheryl's comment. In the Nauvoo Lodge records, Hiram gave his home lodge as Mount Moriah.
Yeah.
Lodge.
It mentioned by Hogan.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the one that's 8 miles. Palmyra, Mount Moriah Lodge. I suppose that's the one Cheryl's talking about, I hope.
No. It's a different Joseph Smith, actually, in Farmington.
Oh.
8 miles.
Okay.
The one I found the record for.
Okay.
That he just purchased property in 1820.
Hey.
In 1820, early 1820s, anyway. Okay.
I'm not trying to take you off course here, but we talked about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that right now.
Oh, all right. Keep going then.
Okay.
Sorry, I gave it away. I blew it, man. I feel bad about this.
Well, we're going to talk about Alvin's possible Masonic membership, which we have absolutely nothing. But these authors somehow find some kind of evidence to present that Alvin may have been a Mason. And it's tied in with Alvin's lap desk that is presently in the Smith, well, it might be in the museum now, but there's a replica of it at the Woods Museum, but it was handed down in the Hiram Smith family, Eldred G. Smith. Okay. And Eldred G. Smith gave a lecture in 2003 that Nick heard. And in that, he said that this box was not only a receptacle for the plates at one time, the gold plates at one time, but you can see they don't really fit. And the desk is a lap desk, and it slants.
Oh, that's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah.
It slants towards you even. Okay. And it looks like they actually opened up the book in order to make it look like it fits better. But
would that help us see that a little better? Yeah, you can see the angle of the desk on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see those wings go away.
So that you put the desk on your lap and you can write on it. And
sure.
You can keep what you normally would keep in a box like this, like paper and pen and pencil and ruler, or some sort of things that you would normally keep in a desk like this. And so Eldred G. Smith, not only did he say that it once held the plates, which he was wrong about, but he also said that it contained Alvin's architectural tools. And this is kind of meaningful because Alvin was the one that started building the frame house. They were living in the cabin, or a cabin, probably on their own property, not the Jennings cabin, but they started building just before Alvin died, the frame house, and the frame was up, and then he died, and they had to finish it. So they imagined that they used these architectural tools to draw the plans for this thing. But according to our authors, you really don't need to plan or draw plans to build a house. I'm not so sure about that assertion. But from this, they say, well, the family tradition must be wrong about architectural tools. What was really in it, and they didn't really understand, was that it was the symbolic working tools used in Freemasonry, like a compass and square, a plumb, level, that Alvin kept them in. So this may be evidence, this family tradition, that Alvin may have been also a Mason.
Mm-hmm.
So now we'll get to the Hiram Smith Masonic records. And what we should know is that he appears in the 1828. Let's see. So here's the.
Now, what's this one? What's this?
I have copies of all the records. This is the Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah. Yeah, let's see. I forgot my camera's up here. Mount Moriah. Return of the Mount Moriah Lodge 112.
Okay.
Held in the town of Palmyra in the county of Wayne and state of New York. June 4th, 1827 to June 4th, 1828. And you can see that it's not all filled out. I mean, they're not doing so great. This lodge is struggling.
Oh boy,
this,
I'd say.
all it does is show the dues. It doesn't show any real initiation date, admission date, any totals or anything. Okay, so a few pages on the next page, page 2, you'll see. Let's go this way. Where is it?
There you go.
You see it?
I'm still looking. Go up a little.
You see other Smiths. Silas Smith, Asa Smith.
Yeah, Asa Smith. Yeah.
Yeah. David Smith II. Hiram Smith.
Yeah.
Spelled with a IRAM. Okay, so then at the end, here's the end. They do include totals. Let's see, go this way. And there's a statement at the end. It's kind of interesting. It says, let's see.
You have to read it. I can't read it that close.
I know. And we further state that our dues have not been remitted, and in consequence of the embarrassed situation of the lodge, we are not able to pay them, and pray the Grand Lodge might remit them. Okay, so they're struggling with along with other lodges in the wake of the William Morgan affair.
Okay.
So, and they eventually closed down. Now, the thing to know is that there is another Hiram Smith living in Manchester at the same time. And this is a page from E.D. Howe's Mormonism Unveiled. And what we're going to look at here is December 4th, 1833, Philaster Hurlbut's group statements, or November 2nd, excuse me, group statement for Manchester. He has one for Palmyra, a group statement, and one for Manchester. And there at the bottom, you can see there's a Hiram Smith that signed his group statement in 1833 with an IR.
In 1833, huh?
Yeah. 1833, there was still a Hiram Smith living there, and he appears on the road list as the, I don't know what you call it. He appears on the road list for before and after 1830. So there is another Hiram Smith. So it's possible that Hiram got initiated, and after the Morgan affair lost interest, and that this is another Hiram Smith that signed it.
Ah,
But our authors do have an interesting argument that 1831 since Hiram moved away, that in the 1831 returns, he is not mentioned or listed in there, but he's
so
also not
he's
listed.
gone by 1831.
Right.
Right.
So they argue that Hiram's not listed in the 1831 returns, and that might match that idea that Hiram left the area, and so it might be our Hiram. The problem with that argument is that he doesn't appear before that one either.
Okay.
So there's a gap. So you could make an argument that the other Hiram, came in.
Might be another one.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
So I think that's a good place maybe to stop.
I think that was. I'm really glad that you said, yeah, let's go on, because that kind of rounds out the whole family
Yeah,
situation.
it's the whole family. It's a good
to this
place to
point.
stop for
Yeah.
now.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting seeing those actual historical records. Copy though. That's fun research right there. That's the way.
I wish I had a slide. If you want, I can make them into slides and send them to you for next time. If you
Why don't you?
look
Yeah,
at it
because
closer.
I have these overheads, but they're not as effective as slides would be. So yeah.
Oh, that might be harder. I don't know the difference.
I don't know. I can send me slides, early next week, tomorrow,
You can
or
probably make
Tuesday,
them into something else.
and then
Whatever
I'll
you
figure something out to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's all good. Okay, so that is very interesting. Now, okay, let's here.
So
Here's a
Cheryl's
little,
not getting it, I guess.
yeah. Here's a little extra overtime. Hiram claimed in Nauvoo that he was a member of that lodge.
No.
So there's.
If she wrote that before I presented this,
Pardon?
she wrote that a while ago, right?
No,
She's not.
just now.
Oh, okay. So again, Hiram could have joined in the gap period that we were talking about, where there's no records, because the Hiram in the 1828 one is already initiated, but assuming it doesn't say, it doesn't fill it out, but he could have joined in the gaps when he turned 21, and then didn't attend anymore. And that the Hiram could be our Hiram, but not necessarily our Hiram. It could be
When he does claim, though, that he was a member of that lodge, you're right. But this actually,
he does.
Interesting.
Claim that he's a member of the lodge.
Right. And on the other hand, here's a secretary of a lodge who actually says, perhaps we're asking too much of the lodge records. Maybe it's just not going to ever be that accurate. And so there's probably always going to be guesswork, but I mean, really, truly, that's the essence of the historical process. That's why it's so fun to get these original historical records, as far as I'm concerned. So,
well, that's why you should be cautious in not making unqualified statements.
Right. Yeah. And so, yeah, he joined in the gap period. That makes sense.
Okay.
That actually would make sense.
This record, 1828 record, could be our Hiram.
Right.
Or it could be another Hiram.
Right.
And it's
but one or the other of them has to be our Hiram, because he claimed that was my lodge.
Yes.
Right.
That's not not in dispute. But I'm just saying, caution with the records, especially when you know that there's another Hiram there.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I don't. Yeah, I think they were pretty good. They were pretty good and cautious. They agree it's in the gaps. We don't know. We can't specifically say which one it was, but that was his lodge. So yeah, it's all good. That's interesting how that works. Yeah.
Well, another researcher that you interviewed was on the phone one time, was so sure that the Canandaigua and that Hiram, and he
Oh
actually
yeah.
had Hiram. He actually had Hiram and Joe Smith Sr. in the Canandaigua Lodge, the very lodge that killed William Morgan. And then Joe Smith reacted to how can
Right.
you support the Masons when they did this murdering of a brother Mason. And
Yeah.
so the caution that there's too
Yeah.
much being claimed, that's our
Sure.
that just we have no evidence that Joseph Smith Sr. joined the Masons.
Yeah, that was interesting to me too. So thank you for this. And thank you in the audience. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Dr. Latursky, for being here. And thank you, Trevor Luke. I know he's got some historical prowess and scholarly knowledge. And so this has been a really fun presentation. It's fun to see actual historical records like that. Thank you, everybody. We're going to call it good tonight. We kind of went a little over, but it's been well worth it. So, and
Good.
next week we will pick up, we will probably cover a couple of chapters next week. I will not misplace my book so that we can, we've got some ideas that Dan wants to cover on the Morgan affair that we've talked about, and then we'll get into the rest of it. But so far as I know, I'm going to end with this Cheryl quote. I'm going to give her the last quote word. Woohoo! Good job, Cheryl. We only claimed the evidence that his H.S. Hiram Smith claimed he was from the MM Lodge,
Right.
that A. Hiram Smith paid. Okay, good. Yeah, that's fair. That's decent. That would be the correct way to do that for sure. So thank you all so much for coming and enjoying an evening of Masonic information and historical methodology. And once again, the basis of my videos has become kind of a pet involvement, a pet project for me is how do I teach myself? How do I learn how to think better? And that's why I love having Dan Vogel as a guest, because he does that. That's why I'm going to love having other guests, Cheryl Bruno, Nick Latursky, and others. I'm even going to have RFM on as a guest. He doesn't know that yet, but he's on schedule. So thank you all. We're going to head out. Be good, do well, have fun, make lots of friends. Don't stay up late tonight, unless, of course, you don't have to go to work tomorrow. So everybody give Dan Vogel a round of applause.
Thank you.
Let's get out of here before we get clobbered, Dan. Okay, 3, 2.